Your first love is back, I'm stepping aside. I'm crying tears of joy, my sugar daddy is finally back. Being a stand-in for 3 years, and making millions. I'm a pro at this. Nina, let's end this. Mike's voice was steady, with a sorrow clouding his eyes. He sat across from me, sliding the termination agreement towards me. I looked at the man I'd been with for 3 years in disbelief. The day finally came. Did she come back? My voice was a bit shaky. He was silent for a few seconds. Yes. 3 years of companionship couldn't compete with a turnaround from his first love. Tears filled my dry eyes, blurring his decisive and heartless signature. 1 drop, this 5 million is compensation for 3 years. 2 drops, you can pick a luxury car from the garage. 3 drops, I'll grant you 1 wish. I don't want these, Mike, can't I just stay with you? I grabbed his arm tightly. He pinched the bridge of his nose, pulling my hand away. We agreed from the start, don't cling, Nina. He paused, coldly handing me the pen. Know your place, you're just a stand-in. I cried out. Mike, how can I live without you? I want to stay, don't push me away. I smudged lipstick, false lashes, and foundation on his custom suit. This was sheer agony for someone as fastidious and OCD as Mike. Mike's brows could squish a fly. Let go, don't make me throw you out. I threw a fit, and he finally got tired of me. He and the butler forced my hand to sign the agreement, ending our relationship. I showed a dead-to-the-world look. Since your first love is back, I guess it's my cue to leave. I put on a brave face with a bitter smile. It seemed like Mike had a moment of conscience, leaning forward, reaching to wipe my tears, but I dodged. Mr. Mike, let's part on good terms and cut all ties, or Miss Helen might misunderstand. Mentioning his first love made Mike pause, gripping his hand in midair. Pack your things. No need, just toss them. I resolutely turned, heading straight for the door. The sadness earlier was gone, my grin widening wildly. With all that money, I can ditch those burdensome things and buy new ones. Discard the used man, the old junk belongs in the trash. 3 tears cost him millions. Totally worth the act, being a drama queen, losing face, pinching my thighs blue. Suddenly, Mike called me. What now? Is he gonna change his mind? Nina, you're mosquito repellent. He eyed me curiously. Oops, I put a bit on my temples to help cry earlier, it fell out of my pocket. I stayed calm. No, it's your repellent. Your neck's got a mosquito bite, apply some. Mike rubbed his neck, eyes shifting. Come on, dude, stop hiding, I know it's a sign of you guys' love. Can't even wait a bit. Leaving, I deleted and blocked all his contacts. I did cry. Totally faked it. Never seeing him again. In the Ferrari driver's seat, I called the number marked H. Miss Helen, it's done. In the cafe, Helen watched the breakup video I recorded. In our line of work, we fulfill clients' needs. During my breakup scene with Mike, I adjusted the camera angle to ensure it was authentic. Strive for truth. She's Mike's first love and also my sugar daddy. Helen's frown deepened. Are you sure this will completely cut ties with Mike? Miss Helen, trust my professional skills. The bolder my tone, the queasier I felt. I messed around on Mike's turf a lot, and he didn't like me, probably despises me. I'm Nina, a professional stand-in. 3 years ago, Helen found me, promising me 10 million to be a stand-in. I never expected it was to replace herself as a substitute for her boyfriend. Kinda interesting. I thought she was broad-minded, getting herself a rival. Then I realized she wasn't broad-minded, just utterly in control and confident. She's a crazy, hard-to-deal-with woman. 3 years ago, Helen suddenly chose to study abroad in pharmaceuticals, catching everyone off guard. And Mike, the successor of a powerful family, couldn't just drop everything to chase her dreams. Both were stubborn, couldn't agree. Helen suggested a clean breakup, no baggage. The day before leaving, she sent me to Mike's bed for a chat. I scrambled to make small talk, almost just stared, painfully awkward. A bit drunk, he touched my face, calling out his first love's name. I knew this job was solid. Helen figured rather than waiting 3 years for him to find new love and a tricky rival, she'd act first, controlling the situation. I was more like a pawn watching Mike's every move. She knew every move, every word between us. Mike treated me well, met my needs as best he could. But I knew I was just a stand-in, taking it seriously would mean losing. For 3 years, we went no further than kisses. Mostly, I wore his first love's clothes, keeping him company, just another face for him to miss. Because Mike couldn't function. Helen gave me a special drug, it suppressed desires. Ruthless, really. Mike didn't touch anyone for 3 years, he almost lost male confidence, something I had to mend. I'd keep Mike company under the covers, just talking for 3 years. Love is the biggest taboo as a stand-in, and luckily, I didn't have that weakness. If our relationship surpassed Helen's limit, I'd lose 1% of my reward. That's real money, it made my heart bleed. So I worked diligently, acting more tireful than a dog daily. Made PPTs to analyze Mike's psychology, battled wits. Used Word to record our actions and reflect daily. Excel sheets to track his mood swings. Figuring out how to make him love Helen through me, without crossing the line. Finally, I'm free. I looked at the remaining amount in my bank account, and tears started rolling from the corners of my eyes. 3 years, 10 years, I can do it. Just don't make me see Mike again, okay? Helen looked me up and down, trying to find a hint of insincerity in my eyes. What? Who's Mike? I don't know him. My tone couldn't be more genuine. Interesting. No wonder he's so obsessed with you. Helen smirked, and it made me uncomfortable. Who? What's she talking about? Then my phone rang, an unknown number. Why isn't Nina answering my calls? That familiar, low voice came through. My heart jumped. Why is Mike calling me? Helen's glance seemed to say, so much for cutting ties. What do you want? Return my key. His house has a passcode, what key is he talking about? This is all just nonsense to trap me. I felt a mountain of pressure and awkwardly replied, I'll mail it back, we owe each other nothing. He tried to say more, but I hung up. The more I talk, the more I might mess up. Helen gave a satisfied nod. 30 million. Miss Nina, would you be interested in another deal? How much? 30 million. I was thinking of taking a break, but forget that. Life is all about hustling. I rubbed my temples. Miss Helen, I'm exhausted these days. Before I could finish, Helen flashed a knowing smile. 35 million. Even if it kills me, I'll take it. Anything you need, just say the word, we're family, no need for formalities. That's the spirit. Helen pulled a photo from her bag and slid it over to me. Here's who you'll be doubling for this time. That's a big amount, this won't be easy. It's mysterious and challenging. I picked up the photo, and my eyes went wide, spitting out water. Helen looked pleased, even my clumsiness seemed familiar to her. She's insane, right? She wants me to impersonate a cat? A skinny, scruffy-looking little orange cat, no less. Is she serious? Now we're doing cross-species stand-ins? I triple-checked, and it was for real. For 35 million, I'll do it. I watched cat documentaries for a whole week. From birth to death, I studied everything from how they use the bathroom to how they yowl when in heat. But still, when I met him, I totally messed it up. The first time I saw Jimmy, I was seriously blown away. He sat calmly, his back straight and slender, jawline sharp with a striking beauty. He was sketching the scenery outside. It was a sunny day, but his painting conveyed a storm's oppressive feel. Jimmy, look who I brought. Helen spoke more softly than ever before. Jimmy slowly turned, and his indifferent almond eyes caught sight of me. They lit up. There was an excitement of seeing prey. I was doubling as the beloved little cat that went missing 3 years ago. Helen said I had the shadow of that kitten, obedient, clever, and cute. What to do, what to do? What should I say to make him interested in me? This meant my entry ticket of 35 million. 1,000 words flashed through my mind, but when nervous, my tongue got all twisted. The air went silent. Once I spoke, I realized how dumb it was. I covered my mouth with both hands, my face burning with shame. Jimmy paused for a second, a smile spreading. That smile was like a winter's warm sun, warming but not reaching the heart. Helen's voice was almost trembling with excitement. Jimmy smiled, and every smile earns you an extra 50,000. Is there really such a thing? Get ready to go broke. Since he likes cat sounds, I'll meow a bit more. Forget about pride. Just when I was about to do the fourth, Jimmy stopped me. Come here. His voice was deep and cold. His previous smile was gone, only indifference remained. I anxiously walked over. A step away from him, a small freckle near his nose caught my eye. His nose bridge was high, and the freckle made him unique. I was so dazzled, before I knew it, I was in his arms. His gaze was burning. The sound of my racing heartbeat was cut off by the door quietly closing, leaving just us in the enclosed space. Jimmy's intense gaze made me feel uncomfortable. My face got ridiculously hot, my heart racing. Don't you like it? I whispered, looking at his indifferent eyes. He frowned, voice deep. Stop meowing, it's not even close. My professionalism as a double was being questioned. You're not allowed to meow in front of others. But there's no one else, isn't that your sister? He grabbed my wrist tighter. Nobody else, just May. Felt like my hand was gonna break from the grip. It hurt, I gasped. Jimmy immediately let me go, saw the red on my wrist, and his eyes widened. He awkwardly yet gently rubbed my wrist, looking a little flustered. Yet more and more forceful, a hint of confused stubbornness in his eyes. I'm okay now. I tried to pull my hand away, but he held me tighter. No, you're hurting. His voice trembled. Something seemed off. I hugged him like calming a child, patting his back softly. I'm really okay, see, it's all good. I waved my hand in front of him, still tightly held in his grip. I was startled, tried to squirm, but he just held tighter again. His large hand clasped mine tightly like I was going to run away. His deep eyes were like bottomless pools, but his voice was so cautious. Don't be afraid of me. Being a double means having a professional ethic. He's basically 35 million walking around, I need to handle him well. Spending time with Jimmy was part of my job. It was the most important thing, since I was basically a clingy cat. I'd follow him around like a shadow. But nothing went as I imagined. Jimmy, I'll be your model. Jimmy, let's bask in the sun together. Jimmy, let me tie your tie. I was being ridiculously clingy, it made me want to gag, yet Jimmy stayed unfazed. There was always something in his eyes that I couldn't figure out. Happy, restrained, disgusted, no matter what I said. He would just reply, no need. Except for that first day when I saw some clear emotion in him, he's been pretty neutral the rest of the time. I suspected he didn't really need me as a stand-in. Miss Nina, it's been half a month, and according to the butler, Jimmy's emotions haven't changed. That means you're not giving him any emotional value, so I think our business here should end. Helen knocked on the table. I suddenly felt a sense of crisis. But Jimmy's like a rock, doesn't care no matter what. But I kept my calm, acting nonchalant. How can you know I can't make him happy? You're not Jimmy. Helen gave me a skeptical look as I nervously called out to Jimmy. Jimmy stood expressionless in front of me, towering over me by a head. I hesitated for a second, then slyly reached for his hand. Standing on tiptoe, I moved closer. Then I stumbled, and before I knew it, Jimmy quickly caught me. I saw the worry in his eyes, clear as day. Taking advantage of the situation, I hugged him, gripping his shirt tightly. Jimmy's eyes were deep, like black holes trying to pull me in. His hand around my waist tightened, and with a reddened face, I softly asked, Jimmy, do you like it? I was taking a gamble. betting that his indifference was just an act. I had noticed him sneaking glances at me when I wasn't looking, paying attention to my every move. He would secretly draw pictures of me, capturing me in a pure, beautiful light. And you can't fake that kind of gaze, he cared. Just as he started to say no, I cut him off. I looked into his eyes and said, word by word, but I like you, Jimmy. If Mike were standing here, he'd be shocked. It was the exact same thing I told him when I confessed 3 years ago, right down to the expression. I had fooled one person after another with just those intense, sincere eyes. Jimmy's words got caught in his throat, and he didn't say a thing, just watched me with a small frown, like he was holding something back. Feeling a bit guilty, I clenched his shirt tighter. Are you ready? If you fall for me, there's no escape. Jimmy's voice had a raspy charm, shifting from serious to joyful and then passionate. My heart skipped a beat, something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But then I thought about the 35 million, and any doubt vanished. Who can say no to money? I nodded shyly. Facing his devastatingly handsome face, it was hard not to be moved. But I knew it was all fake. Jimmy smiled, the corners of his lips curving into a childlike grin. He had the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. Even years later, I still dream about that moment. While I was still stunned, Jimmy just scooped me up in a bridal carry. What are you doing? Put me down. I squirmed, but my strength didn't mean much to Jimmy. He was visibly in a good mood, his eyes soft as he rubbed his forehead against mine. Nina, since you kissed me, you're mine. Jimmy's tempting voice made my ears burn, and I felt dizzy. I turned my head and saw Helen smiling like a fox. Suddenly, I felt like I'd been tricked. If I had known what was coming, I'd have steered clear of Jimmy even if it meant starving in the streets. After I confessed to Jimmy, he kind of changed overnight. Completely different from the cold, indifferent persona he used to have. He spoiled me rotten, just went really overboard with it. Designer, luxury items filled my wardrobe without me even asking. He even wanted to break down walls to make room for more clothes, bags, and shushed go shopping with me, and if I lingered on something for even a second, he'd just buy it without a second thought. If I got a tiny cut on my hand, he'd worry for half a day. On stormy nights, he'd hold me tight. That feeling of security was addictive. To cater to my picky tastes, Jimmy hired several chefs. He'd practically carry me to the dining room for meals. He just took care of everything in my life. Jimmy would pinch my cheeks every time, saying how thin I was. I'd gained a whole 20 pounds since arriving here. Mike preferred a slimmer figure and would notice my waist getting thicker. He'd always say, Nina, your waist isn't as slim as before, it's not like hers. Helen was thin, so I had to change myself to her standards. Every time I heard that, I'd panic and go on a crazy diet. Soon enough, I'd be so hungry I could eat a horse. Jimmy would wrap his arms around me from behind, resting his head on my shoulder. He poked my belly and chuckled. I thought he was making fun of me, so I instinctively said, don't laugh, I promise to start dieting tomorrow. As a stand-in, the basic rule is to meet the employer's needs. But Jimmy held me tighter, pinched my cheek, and said with a warm voice, spoiling me, why diet? I took my time building that little bit of weight, don't let my efforts go to waste. His words made my nose tingle. Remembering all the ways he's been so good to me, it felt hard to believe. Why are you so good to me? Because I want you to stay with me, want you to love me. His gentle eyes seemed to see through my fake love. Panicking, I buried my head in his chest, unable to handle such intense emotion. For someone who grew up without much love, this torrent of affection didn't feel real. Plus, I knew it was just a financial exchange, sooner or later, that'd end too. It was another stormy night. I curled up under the sheets, comforted by Jimmy's presence since my parents died on that stormy day. Thunder made me irrationally fearful. Jimmy ruffled my head, don't be scared, I'm here. His steady heartbeat and warmth soothed me. Suddenly, my phone rang, and my heart skipped a beat. Why is he calling me? I clutched the phone and softly asked Jimmy, Jimmy, could I have a hot glass of milk? As soon as Jimmy left the room, I picked up the phone. "Miss Nina, you need to come over. Sir is causing a scene asking for you." Mike's butler sounded a bit frantic. It's rare for someone who usually looks down on me to have a tone of request. Quite curious. There were also sounds of things being smashed in the background. "You've got the wrong person, Butler Chi, you should be calling Miss Helen." I don't know what kind of drama Mike is up to. "Miss Nina," the butler began before Mike snatched the phone away. "Nina, where are you? I miss you, can you come see me?" His speech was slurred. "He's drunk." What a nuisance. Just as I was about to hang up, Mike added, "Nina, don't you want that ring necklace?" I sprang up from my bed. That necklace was a keepsake from my parents. It went missing recently, the only memento, and I lost it. I'd been regretting and grieving for over a month. Turns out Mike hid it. That jerk. I hurriedly got dressed. Jimmy, holding a glass of milk, had been standing by the door for who knows how long. He came over and handed me the warm milk, asking where I was going. I made up an excuse, saying my good friend needed me to find something at her place. "You'll be scared going alone." "Let me come with you," Jimmy said, reaching for his jacket. I grabbed his hand. No need. I can go by myself." I insisted on going alone since I didn't want him to know about the awkward relationship between Mike and me. Jimmy gave me a quick kiss. "Stay safe, Nina." As I headed to the door, Jimmy softly said, "Nina, don't lie to me." His words, soft as feathers, weighed heavy on my heart. Feeling tense, I walked out with stiff shoulders. By the time I got to Mike's house, I was drenched in sweat. The loud music couldn't drown out the rumbling thunder. I walked up to Mike. Empty bottles surrounded him and he reeked of alcohol, his face flushed. The Mike I knew wasn't a drinker. I nudged his leg. "Mike, where's my stuff?" Mike stared at me for a while without saying anything. Is this guy dumb? "Nina, why haven't you come to see me all this time?" He looked at me innocently like he was the one who told me to get lost originally. "We're done." I never thought I'd see such a hurt expression on Mike's face. I asked for the necklace. "If I give it to you, will you not leave?" "Fine." I answered him casually. He took the necklace off his neck. What a weird move. Why wear something my mom left me around his neck? I grabbed the necklace, turned to leave, but Mike pulled me back, making me fall into his arms. "Nina, I really miss you." What am I to him? I struggled and asked. "You're Nina." My head buzzed. Did Mike fall for me? He was strong, like a beast out of control. "Nina, you've gained weight." "Mike, let go of me." I pinched and stepped on him. He was unfazed. "This is the real you," Mike said with fake sentimentality. With a forceful turn, he pinned me against the couch back. Panicking, I wondered what he was up to. "Mike, don't do anything rash." I had nowhere to retreat. "No," I said, turning my head away in disgust. When he was just inches from me, a familiar voice echoed from the door. "Mike, what are you doing?" Helen stood at the door, giving us a cold look. Big misunderstanding here. Mike retreated hastily. "Helen, let me explain." Rushing to Helen's side, I tried to clear up the situation. Thinking of all the TV shows I'd watched, The First Love confronting the imposter, or The First Love misunderstanding the imposter's intentions, I figured there was a high chance I wouldn't leave here unscathed. "Helen," I started, but she cut me off. She glanced at me and said dismissively, "Leave, don't keep Jimmy waiting." I didn't expect it to be this easy. I eagerly escaped the whirlpool, ignoring her last words. The rain kept pouring. In it stood a tall figure, firm and upright. Jimmy. What was he doing here? His face was somber, which suddenly scared me. "Come here." I walked over, feeling guilty, as he wrapped me up in his coat. Wanting to smooth things over, I hugged him tightly. "Jimmy, did you come to take me home?" He didn't respond, but his eyebrows creased deeply. "Why are your hands so cold?" He held my hand, his voice heavier than the storm around us. "Did he touch you?" I hesitated for a moment. He knows about us. His presence was terrifyingly intense. Since that's the case, there was no point hiding it anymore. I tried to appease him. He squeezed my hand pretty bad, see? I showed him my hand with red marks. He softly blew on it, and then there was a sharp pain in my wrist. Jimmy bit me hard. Nina, didn't I tell you to stop lying to me? Little liar, why do you keep doing it? He whispered in my ear, is locking you up the only way to make sure you'll stay with me? I felt a chill down my spine. What was he suggesting? My mind raced, and I pretended to be angry and pushed him away. The rain quickly drenched me, and Jimmy tried to pull me back, but I was stubborn. He had no choice but to cover me with the umbrella while getting soaked himself. I just wanted to surprise you, give you something precious to me. Was that wrong? Looks like I was overthinking. I took the ring off the necklace and threw it to the ground. Startled, Jimmy handed me the umbrella and searched for the ring in the rain. It pained me to see it, but he had to find it. Soaked, Jimmy gleefully handed me the ring, asking me to put it on him. His eyes sparkled brightly in the dark night. I'm sorry, Nina, I wronged you. I'm sorry. It's always best to accept an apology, that's how I handle things. The ring fit perfectly. If it got lost, you'd lose me too. This was a keepsake from my parents. I hadn't even had a chance to cherish it. Jimmy hugged me tightly. I'll never lose it again. The next day, Mike broke an arm. Helen called to confront Jimmy, asking if he was behind it. Jimmy didn't deny it, simply saying, he touched someone he shouldn't have. Warn him, if it happens again, a broken arm will be the least of his worries. His icy tone sent a shiver down my spine. So, Mike was supposed to be Jimmy's future brother-in-law, but I didn't expect him to be so ruthless. He rubbed his chin against the top of my head. Nina got revenge for you, happy? I nodded mechanically. Good girl. I could clearly feel this guy was a bit dangerous. Over the weekend, Jimmy took me back to his old house for his mom's birthday. I could sense the low mood around Jimmy, and it seemed like he didn't get along well with his mother. But he still took care of me gently, hiding his emotions well. His mom's birthday party was very simple, more like a family dinner from a distance. I spotted Mike. Why was he here too? He looked at me and Jimmy holding hands, fury in his eyes, and his glass shattered in his hand. Blood ran down the glass, but all I cared about was the expensive glass. When Helen showed concern, he brushed it off with an excuse. Jimmy pulled me toward Mrs. Her smile vanished the second she saw me. She really didn't like me. I instinctively tried to pull away from Jimmy, but he held on tight. Don't be scared. Jimmy held my hand as we sat down, thoughtfully picking out my favorite foods, ignoring his mom completely. I politely wished her a happy birthday. But she didn't appreciate it. Instead, she mocked, Jimmy, you bring just anyone home these days. The table went silent. Helen burst out, Mom. Jimmy slammed his chopsticks on the table, almost flipping it over. This is my future wife, show some respect. I'm here more for your sake anyway. Jimmy's face was dark as he glared at Mrs. With no emotion. I glanced at him suddenly, wife? My heart skipped a beat, and the money between us seemed less important. Everyone at the table was shocked by his words. Mike dropped his chopsticks. Mrs. He shook with anger, I don't agree. She pointed at me, you need to get over this right now. Jimmy shielded me behind him. I'm just letting you know. I never cared much for this family, and won't be coming back. He gently wiped the corner of my mouth. Let's go get some of your favorite cakes. Jimmy was ready to leave, but I stood firm. I hugged his arm and smiled brightly at his mom. Maybe your eyesight is failing, I'm Jimmy's girlfriend. Luckily, he's smart enough not to be led astray. I cheekily stood on tiptoe to kiss his face. You're awesome, Jimmy. Jimmy looked as happy as a big puppy. Mrs. He was furious, her favorite son had publicly defied her because of me. She probably thought I was the most cunning woman ever. I didn't care though. Whoever made me unhappy, I'd make them miserable. Standing at the door waiting for Jimmy's car, someone called my name. Mike stormed over. Nina. I almost ran, but he pulled me back. If you want everyone to know about us, then run. I glared at him before he dragged me to a corner. His eyes were red as he stared at me intensely. You're with Jimmy? Shaking off his hand, I replied, so what if I am? His face twisted. Didn't you say you loved me? How? I cut him off. That was before. What, am I not allowed to love someone else after you're done with me? Besides, your first love is back. Don't drag me, your stand-in, into your mess. I turned to leave, but Mike pulled me back into a hug. Nina, I never thought of you as a stand-in. I love you. You can't be with Jimmy, he is. Suddenly, he went silent. A fist whizzed past my ear, aimed right at Mike's supposedly loving face. A strong force pulled me into a hug. He's bothering you again. Jimmy's face was stern as he twisted Mike's incoming punch. Mike winced, his face paling with pain. Do you not want your other hand, Mike? His voice was chilling. Jimmy, let go. When Mike was ghostly pale, I tugged at Jimmy's sleeve, and he finally released Mike. He whispered to me, did it scare you? I shook my head, then nodded. Jimmy's face changed instantly, eyes as cold as ice towards Mike. If I didn't stop him, who knows what might have happened. I reassured him, I'm fine, let's go. It's chilly. As we walked past Mike, he urgently said, Nina, you'll regret it. I paused for a second, and Jimmy looked at me, seemingly waiting for my reply. Firmly, I said, I won't. Jimmy pinned me against the door, his intense gaze making me blush. I weakly asked, aren't we getting cakes? He chuckled, his large hand lingering at my waist, his voice low and gruff, tickling my ears. Yeah, I'm ready to have my cake now. Gonna let me? His intentions were clear. I need to use the bathroom. I quickly slipped away under his arm. Once in the bathroom, I called Helen. Sis, you're really my sister, right? Do you still have any of that desire-suppressing stuff? I had a feeling today would be tough. Helen sounded amused. Oh, that? None left, but I've got something that might spice things up. Want it? Who keeps stuff like that lying around? Doesn't that just make things worse? I braced myself and walked out. Should have stayed in there all night rather than lying here questioning life with sore hips. Jimmy leaned over, softly whispering, Nina, I'm sorry. Don't be mad, I bought you a cake. Since our relationship deepened, Jimmy's been more clingy, sticking to me constantly. He'd hold me close and whisper sweet nothings over and over again. My heart felt warm and happy. So this is what dating feels like. I started dreaming about a future with Jimmy until a phone call shattered all my dreams. That day, I randomly picked up a call from an unknown number. As soon as the voice on the other end spoke, I recognized it was Mike. I wanted to hang up, but he hurriedly stopped me. Nina, don't hang up. I'm telling you this for your own good. Nina, Jimmy is really no good. He's with you for a reason. I scoffed, like what reason could he have? He will make your life a living hell. Mike, are you crazy or something? Maybe see a neurologist, just in case. He's truly a sadist. He personally strangled his beloved cat. He's violent and paranoid, even his parents are afraid of him. Don't be fooled by him. Didn't Helen say the cat ran away? How could it be Jimmy who killed it? I didn't believe him and hung up, even though Mike's words piqued my curiosity. I realized I never heard Jimmy talk about the cat. I planned to ask Jimmy about it, but when I went downstairs, I couldn't find him anywhere. Instead, I noticed a usually locked door was open. I impulsively went inside. What I saw shocked me. I gently pushed the door open. The room was dark. I felt along the wall and turned on the light. The light was blinding, and the scene was horrifying. The square room was covered with photos on the south wall, there were pictures of him with the cat. Jimmy's cold face showed a hint of softness. On the north wall, there were gruesome pictures of the cat, blood-stained and miserable. The east wall was plastered with pictures of me, completely filling the wall. They seemed like secretly taken photos, from long ago, ones I didn't even remember. I felt my heart pounding and a chill running down my spine. When did he start noticing me and silently intrude into my life without me knowing? Suddenly, a glass container in the middle of the room, covered with a black cloth, caught my attention. I slowly walked over and pulled off the cloth. I covered my mouth and fell to the floor. Inside the glass container was the dead cat preserved in formaldehyde. He really killed his own cat. I looked at the empty west wall and felt a cold shiver from my feet to my entire body. What did he plan to hang there? Photos of me being abused? While lost in thought, I heard the doorknob turn, and my heart leapt into my throat. The sound stopped. Helen had called Jimmy away. With trembling legs, I quickly ran out. While going upstairs, I overheard them seemingly plotting something. Helen handed a syringe and medication to Jimmy. She said worriedly, "Are you sure you want to inject Nina?" Jimmy looked at the drugs, chuckled, and nodded. "She can only love me." I suddenly felt my blood run cold. Was he going to harm me? "Nina, what are you doing here?" Jimmy had appeared in front of me without me noticing, examining me with a scrutinizing stare. I nervously clenched the fabric of my clothes, trying to stay casual. "I woke up and didn't see you, so I went looking for you. Are you sneaking off to eat something delicious without me?" Jimmy helplessly ruffled my hair, saying of course he'd bring his sweetheart. His hand was warm, yet when it touched my skin, it made me feel freezing cold. "Nina, how about having the injection? So we can be together forever, okay?" Jimmy held the syringe, wrapping me in his embrace, whispering in my ear. I shuddered in fear. "No, no." I sat up, gasping for air, having woken Jimmy with my shout. He held me worriedly. "Nina, did you have a nightmare?" I nodded, lying that I dreamed he didn't like me anymore. He said it could never happen. I hesitantly asked Jimmy what if, one day, I stopped liking him. He held me tighter, whispering like a devil in my ear, "Then I'll keep you locked up, so you can only like me." He caressed my leg bone. "We can clamp this down." "Nina, do you want to be confined?" I stiffly shook my head. "How could I not like you? You're my favorite." I hugged Jimmy tightly, trying to hide my trembling. Crazy, crazy. I could always feel Jimmy's love, but it had a weird vibe. Now I understood it was an almost pathological kind of love, one that seeped into my life and cut out everything else, life only with his love. That love suffocated me and scared me. "Mike, remember you promised to grant me a wish? Time for you to deliver." Soon, it was Jimmy's birthday. Helen repeatedly emphasized not to celebrate his birthday. I didn't understand why he hated birthdays, but I knew I couldn't miss this chance. I meticulously planned every detail of the birthday, baking him a cake by hand, with little cartoon versions of us on top. I put on an outfit I prepared, sexy and alluring, wrapping myself up as a gift to surprise Jimmy. It worked surprisingly well. Jimmy was thrilled. He did whatever I asked. He held me affectionately, beaming with joy. "Nina, this is the happiest birthday I've ever had." I gently touched his face, kissed his brow. "Sorry, but you might not think so later." The cake was demolished, not even a spoonful left. I fooled around with Jimmy, putting him completely at ease. It was about time. The drug started working. Jimmy lay on the bed, his eyes unfocused, his whole body limp. "The meds Mike gave me were working great." He looked at me with soft eyes, his voice hoarse. "Nina." I took out my packed stuff, stood by the bed, and glanced at him. "Jimmy, your love is too twisted, and I can't handle it. Let's never meet again." Strangely, my eyes felt teary. Even though this started as something just about money, somewhere along the line, I crossed that boundary and started caring for him. Jimmy hit the floor hard. His eyes were red, painfully holding onto my hand, helplessly saying, "Nina, don't go. Tears rolled down his sharp nose. It was the first time I saw him so hurt. My own heart ached to the point of suffocation. But I knew clearly what was more important, life or love. His nails left a long red line on my hand. It hurt. It wasn't even that painful, but my tears flowed anyway. He instantly let go of my hand and stepped back. "Nina, I'm sorry I hurt you." Hearing those words felt like a knife in my heart. I turned away and walked off. Mike kept his promise by helping me escape from Jimmy. That's the only decent thing he's ever done. "Molly, don't run too far." I called out to the little girl bouncing towards the store's door. Since leaving Jimmy, I've been back at my mom's old home, not telling anyone. I opened my own cake shop, finally living out my dream. The only thing that worries me is Molly. She's a curious and mischievous little soul. She was a total surprise. For months after leaving Jimmy, I found out I was pregnant. Out of selfishness, I welcomed this little angel. Keeping the child meant freedom. But who knew she'd be more of a little devil than an angel? I can't take my eyes off her for a minute without her running off. With recent child abduction reports, I'm a bit on edge. Frantically, I looked for her, asking nearby shop owners, but no one had seen my kid. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Mom, I'm here." Molly's cheerful voice came from the crowd. I rushed towards her, not noticing the tall man by her side. Molly winked at me and whispered in my ear, "Mom, this uncle is super handsome, super nice, and perfect to be your boyfriend." It's the first time I've heard her speak so highly of a man. This is like the nth guy Molly's tried to set me up with. Despite being so young, she's eager to marry me off, always trying to play matchmaker for me. Molly knows how to make things awkward, always leaving me blushing. I'm not interested in starting a new relationship. I hurriedly apologized for Molly's childish remarks. Before I could finish, I froze. Molly was eagerly holding the man's hand. "Uncle, isn't my mom super pretty?" He was dressed in a long black coat, standing tall, looking more mature and composed than 4 years ago. The only thing that hadn't changed was his deep affection when looking at me. Reflecting me in his dark eyes, he nodded. "Pretty." My mind went blank, almost losing my balance. Jimmy caught me just in time. Why was Jimmy here? I clenched my fists, my heart racing. Molly, ever the chatterbox, continued, "Do you like my mom?" He replied without hesitation. I felt like I was back 4 years ago when he was earnestly confessing his love to me. "My mom says my dad's grave is taller than me now and definitely won't come back, so can you be my dad?" With hope in her eyes, Molly looked at Jimmy. I tried to cover her mouth, but it was too late. Staring at me, Jimmy slowly and deliberately said, "Nina, is this what you're telling her about me?" My mind went blank. He knew. Is he here to confront me, to settle old scores? I couldn't meet his eyes. "It's none of your business." Do you think I believe that? I felt my facade crumbling. Believe it or not. Hurriedly, I tried to drag Molly away, but she had other plans. Molly, with her big eyes, glanced between us, narrowly avoiding my reach. She squeezed out a few tears and spoke in a soft voice, "Daddy, my legs hurt so much. Carry me, please. I'm too heavy for Mommy." "Daddy? Come on, a minute ago she was just fine, and now she's saying her legs hurt." Through gritted teeth, I said, "Molly, Mommy can carry you. We don't know this uncle. He has things to do." But Jimmy picked her up with one arm, saying, "I'm not busy, and we know each other well. Dad, my mom gets lost easily. You should hold her hand." "Seriously, Molly? You make me sound like a total airhead, selling your mom out like that." My hand was firmly clasped, no way to break free. Jimmy slightly smiled, "Let's go." Molly enthusiastically led the way. My nerves spiked. This felt like inviting trouble in. Molly pointed at a big screen in the square, all excited. "Dad's on TV." I watched as the business news played on the screen. Jimmy was being interviewed. Known as a rising business star, Jimmy had impressed in both tech and pharmaceuticals in just 2 short years. Everyone wanted to know him. When asked about his personal life, he smiled lightly. "I already have a wife. She's always been in my heart." The crowd found it romantic. The host asked, "But we haven't heard you're married?" Jimmy thought for a few seconds. "Haven't convinced her yet, but in my heart, she's my wife. A few years ago, I did something foolish and she left. My biggest regret." Watching his sincerity on the screen, he wasn't blaming me. He was reflecting on himself. It seemed like he had changed from 4 years ago. Molly, with pursed lips, said, "Uncle, I'm sorry, but you have a wife. I'll look for another dad." Molly tried to wriggle out of Jimmy's arms, but he held her close. "You're just like your mom, heartless. Your mom's who I meant by wife. Finding her another man, huh?" I was still wary of Jimmy, worried he'd take Molly away or lock us up. But he didn't seem to have those intentions. Every day at my cake shop, he'd quietly watch me, like he was making up for 4 years of absence. "I want to order a cake. It's very special to me." Jimmy showed me a picture of a cake I made 4 years ago. For a moment, I froze. "I can't make that." "Then I'll borrow your tools and do it myself." Then he handed me a card. "Password is your birthday. No limit, spend freely." Before I could protest, he'd rolled up his sleeves and started working on the cake. Looking at a cake identical to the one from years ago, old memories came rushing back. Jimmy's teary eyes begging me felt like every dream I'd had weighing on my mind. Once again, my heart ached. Why did he have to show up and make me remember the past? Those sweet and bitter memories bring back a longing I can't control. "Nina, you see, my skills aren't too bad, right? Just go, please stop bothering me. I'm really scared of you. I'm scared you'll lock me up, scared of those long needles going into me, scared I'll end up like the cat." Jimmy gave a bitter smile, choking up, "Nina, I could never lock you up. Maybe I thought about it once, but not anymore. Nina, I know I'm sick. That twisted mind of mine frightened you, but over the years I've worked with the doctors to get better. It's so I don't hurt you, so you're not afraid of me." He answered my questions one by one, saying those injections weren't meant to hurt me, just a new kind of birth control that doesn't harm the body. I admit I was selfish and obsessive. I didn't want anyone, not even a child, to come between us. Molly clung to my leg, blinking at me nervously. He smiled, "And now I understand that love starts with respect. I won't force my wants onto you anymore." I was at a loss for words, choking a bit. Turns out I misunderstood Jimmy all along. He said the cat wasn't tortured by him. It ran away and got hurt by someone else. His one source of comfort and solace was gone just like that. Jimmy blamed himself for not protecting what he cherished. If he had watched it all the time, he wondered, would it still be alive if he had kept it locked up? If he'd just kept it close, maybe it could have grown up happily. He pasted the cat's remains and those heartbreaking photos on the wall to remind himself. He thought locking up the ones and things he loved would mean they'd always be there, an innocent boy, clumsily trying to protect me in his own way. "I thought that by keeping you locked up, I was protecting you. I thought you'd be happy, never leave, only love me." Jimmy's voice was so cautious, like a child without security, tugging painfully at my heart. "I did so many things that scared you before. The doctor says I'm better now. Can you give me another chance? Teach me how to love." I threw myself into his arms and hugged him tight, my tears soaking his shirt. I don't know if I'm trying to give him security, or trying to gather the warmth I missed over the years. He carefully placed his hand on my back, both gentle and firm. "Jimmy, I'm not good at teaching, nor do I like it." Jimmy looked helpless, and I cut him off by standing on my toes. "Because I, too, am lacking in love. I want us to learn how to love together. Jimmy, I love you. This time it's not about money, it's all about me." Epilogue: My brother's cat died. It was brutally killed. He originally came abroad to recover in peace, but now his condition worsened. He locks himself in his room all day, every day. He's my precious baby brother, and I'm scared something will happen to him. I owe him so much. If it weren't for me, my Jimmy would be a cheerful, happy boy. When he turned 10, he and I were out to buy his birthday cake and got kidnapped. The kidnappers had their eyes on us from the start. Before we could even shout, we were knocked out. Jimmy, being the smart one, distracted them so I could escape, risking his own life. He was so young yet incredibly selfless and loving. I swore I'd always give him the best things. It took me a day and a night to get rescued, but I begged my mom to save Jimmy. Mom, however, was too focused on Dad, who was never home. Instead of rescuing Jimmy right away, she used him to threaten Dad, wasting precious time. When Jimmy was finally rescued, he was a changed person, covered in scars. The deep cut on his wrist was like a wound in my heart. I can't forget it. Nobody knows what he endured in those 2 days and 3 nights. But he became withdrawn, distant from everyone, even me. The only kindness he showed was to a skinny little orange cat. Now that the cat is gone, I'm scared he'll do something rash, so I gave him some tasks to keep busy. I had him keep tabs on Mike and Nina. To listen to their recordings, watch their tapes, and alert me if anything goes out of line. I'm not breaking up with Mike just yet. Though the using a stand-in idea is absurd, it's somewhat safe. Better to take the initiative than be forced. Maximize benefits. It was just to keep Jimmy occupied, but he seemed to brighten up daily. I even saw smiles. I was shocked. Finally, he was improving. By chance, I found Nina's photos plastered all over his room. He kept drawing her on canvases. Every time I mentioned her, Jimmy perked up. That's when it hit me, Jimmy might have feelings for Nina. I brought him back home early and deliberately created opportunities for them to meet. It worked wonders. Jimmy got better by the day. Seeing Nina made me realize I made the right choice. I was ready to plan their wedding. But then Mike fell for Nina too. Ridiculous. He even tried to slander Jimmy to get his way. When Nina left, Jimmy plunged back into darkness. Worse than before. He drank excessively, locked himself up, and scratched his hands raw. He was a wreck, despondent. He'd stare at photos on the wall, lost in thought, even considered suicide. I was so heartbroken I wanted to kill Mike. We broke up, and I gave him a good beating, making sure he couldn't walk easily. But compared to Jimmy's happiness, it was barely enough. Jimmy loves Nina and can't forget her. I used that to encourage him to pull himself together. I patiently guided him. I said you need to get strong, get healthy, so Nina can see you love yourself. That's the only way to win her back. The first thing Jimmy did when he pulled himself together was to storm into business, crushing Mike's company to near bankruptcy. Mike begged me, but I ignored him. Compared to Jimmy, Mike meant nothing to me. Mess with my brother, and you'll pay. Jimmy got colder, shut off his emotions, locked his heart. He turned into a high-powered work machine, expanding his business rapidly in 3 years. Everyone called him a business prodigy, but he wasn't happy. He suffered insomnia, needing heavy sleeping pills to rest. And when he dreamed, it was only of Nina's retreating back. He would softly ask me, "Helen, how come Nina doesn't even speak to me in dreams?" 3 years after Nina left, we finally heard about her through relentless searching. I also found out I had an adorable little niece. I thought Jimmy would rush to Nina, bring her back to stay by his side. But he was too scared to approach. So, he watched from the second floor opposite Nina's cake shop, eating her cakes, staring at her. A guy who doesn't like sweets was eating 3 cakes a day. He didn't dare get close. He said he was scared of scaring her off. He said he'd wait until he was genuinely okay, then try for her forgiveness. My dear brother's tenderness broke my heart. So he started cooperating seriously with therapy, a year's worth of progress. I saw his struggles firsthand. It was tough. Finally, Jimmy and Nina sorted things out and got back together. I cried so much at the wedding. I was so relieved, like I had achieved something monumental. Molly came over and teased, "Auntie, are you crying because you don't have a boyfriend?" My tears dried right up. Molly, is that polite? Not having a boyfriend isn't a big deal. I'll find you one even cooler than my dad. She whispered. I set my dad and mom up, you know. Molly looked so proud. I thought that handsome guy would be perfect. Molly went over and whispered something, then gave me the cue to faint. I stumbled into the handsome guy's arms. He scooped me up, cradling me. Don't worry, hang in there. I don't know what Molly told him to get him so concerned. Molly waved from behind, mouthing, Auntie, go for it. How could I not snag this guy and have a second baby, thanks to Molly's brilliant plan?